Game 3, Klonoa, Door to Phantomile. Part 1, Background. Crash Bandicoot, Spyro the Dragon, Gex, Rayman, Croc. The PS1 is no stranger to the genre of mascot platformers. Being Sony's first standalone console, every company was determined to make their mark on the PlayStation by creating a character that could rival everyone's favorite red jumping Martin. Namco, being no stranger to the formula of creating a perfect mascot, threw their hat into the ring with the release of Klonoa, Door to Phantomile in 1997. Directed by Hideo Yoshizawa, the mastermind behind the notoriously difficult Ninja Gaiden series on the NES, Klonoa began development as an adaptation of the dark and gritty manga series Spriggan. Unable to acquire the licensing, the team decided instead of throwing their work away to instead pivot to a lighter and more whimsical game. Spriggan would go on to get a PS1 adaptation from a little indie studio called From Software, but that's a story for another time. The back of Klonoa's box pulls no punches, going right for the throats of other 3D games at the time by boasting that a player could, quote, never get lost in this 3D world, and that it wouldn't have any of the, quote, aimless and wandering feel of other 3D action games. Before going into Klonoa, I had a little bit of an idea what I was getting myself into. I had the Wii remake titled just Klonoa when I was a kid, and I remember liking it despite not remembering too much of it outside of the colorful environments and little guy character designs. I have high expectations going into this game. It's rare that a game can convey so much charm in just its boxes. Even the JP and PAL art is peak. Part 2, My Playthrough. Before starting the game, we're met with some of the warmest and most upbeat pan flute jams that the world has ever heard over some cool action shots of characters and areas of the game. This fades into the title screen. Upon hitting start and selecting new game, we are met with our first of many cutscenes. Our journey begins with some vague musings about remembering dreams as a ring bearing a bright gem falls from the moon. Cryptic moments now past, we get our first sights on the box hero of our story. We see this carefree little guy chasing a butterfly and having the time of his life before something crashes to the land behind him. When investigating, our hero finds a ring embedded in the ground. Pulling the ring out of the ground, we are met by an even littler guy who emerges from the gem centerpiece in the ring. With a huge smile on his face, our hero rushes home to show off his new friend. Before reaching home, the hero witnesses a second object crash into a hill near his village. The sky begins to darken before everything is swallowed by darkness. In a panic, our hero wakes up from this nightmare. Looking around his room, he sees the ring from his dreams and his beloved friend. Being woken up by another loud bang, our hero Klonoa, a fuzzy little guy, and Hugh-Pow, a littler orb guy, decide to go up to Bell Hill to investigate the mysterious crash. The two leave their home, and without even a loading screen, we enter stage 1-1. Now with control over Klonoa, we learn the game has extremely simple controls. Just two buttons, attack and jump, plus movement, of course. After getting our bearings, the game gives us a perfect series of unspoken tutorials in the form of optional collectibles. We first learn that hitting an enemy with our attack causes them to become a balloon in our hands. Pressing attack again allows us to throw the enemy, getting rid of them. But what's with this platform over here, and why are the enemies infinitely respawning? Here we learn that when holding an enemy, we can perform a double jump, allowing us to get the gem on top of this platform. Venturing forth, we find another oddity in the world. This time it's in the form of an egg in the background. Well, if an enemy can be thrown down, then it would follow that they could be tossed into the background as well. This proves to be true, and we are rewarded with another gem. Continuing on, we find a strange object with an enemy standing below it. Using our singular verb of hit with enemy, we pop the bubble, filling in the first of 6 tiles in the bottom right of the UI. We venture a little farther, finding a second bubble above a wind generator, and finally a third one after a short run down a hill just before a cave. This is the end of the tutorial section, which does just a perfect job of presenting the player with the right amount of simple and optional challenges to get in touch with how to engage with the game and its world. It takes a lot of guts as a developer to trust that a player can figure out what they need to do without being told, and Klonoa executes on that trust perfectly. We enter the cave and are immediately accosted by a mysterious man from above. This man jumps down and reveals himself as Baloo, the town's mason. Taking great pride in his work, he tells us about the legendary diva Laphise, whose likeness he has carved into a cliff face. He tells us that he's working on building a tower to get to the moon so he can meet LaFaiz for himself. Being very worried about stranger danger, we exit the tower and continue to hunt for the object that fell from the sky. Now out of the tower, we find our fourth collectible bubble using a little green guy to get some extra height before finding our first branching path. Taking the bottom path, we find another bubble and what feels like progress, so we turn back. The upper path nets us the final bubble, an extra life, and puts us exactly where we turned back on the lower path. How convenient. We then exit through another cave, clearing the stage. Now on the world map, we see the 6 bubbles we popped housed 6 little guys who play us some music and give us fanfare that lasts a weirdly long amount of time. We then save and enter stage 1-2, the Gunston Mine. The stage begins by showing us a little guy bubble to the left who is too high for us to grab with a regular jump, and the only enemy who is grabbable is beyond a wall that prevents us from going back while holding him. We find some platforms past the enemy that allows us to loop around and grab the little guy. Pressing on, we find an egg in the foreground that, after throwing an enemy at it, breaks the shell, getting us another little guy. We continue on and find a minecart that, after a hectic ride, breaks into countless pieces, but puts us to an exit to the cave. Outside the cave, we get caught in some flash rain and manage to find our third little guy on the cliff's edge. We do some more exploring and find 2 different paths, both of which seem likely to be progress. We decide to try the lower path first, which, after popping a large enemy, gets us another little guy. Looks like we made the right call. Returning to the upper path, we re-enter the cave. Once inside, we liberate our 5th little guy and knock down a bridge by throwing an enemy at it. A bit deeper, we find the final bubble, rescuing everyone in the stage before making it to the exit out the top of the cave. Now outside at Bell Hill, our heroes overhear 2 nefarious individuals saying that they cannot let LaFaiz sing her Song of Rebirth. To prevent this, they will imprison her in the darkness so they can destroy the world instead. The villains then try to loot LaFaiz's body, but are unable to find the pendant they are looking for. Trying to get a closer look, our heroes are discovered. Gadius, being the leader, takes LaFaiz's body and escapes, leaving his henchman Joka to fight us. Joka summons the monster Rongo Longo, and we get into our first boss fight. This is a simple fight in a circular arena. All we have to do is throw enemies at Rongo's back while he's not doing big jumpos or causing shockwaves. Rongo goes down in 5 hits, and stage 1-2 is cleared. After the battle is over, Joka, in fear, jumps off the bell and runs away. As he escapes, we see an object fall from the bell. Upon picking it up, we realize that it's LaFaiz's moon pendant and decide to take it to Grandpa to see if he knows anything more about why Gadius would want it. Grandpa, being as baffled as we are, tells us to go visit the old woman in Fourlock Forest to try and see if she knows anything more. Back on the world map, our little guy band grows by 6, and we move on to stage 2-1, Fourlock Forest. Once in the forest, we see the enemies become a little stronger. While before we could grab an enemy at any point, now certain enemies can only be grabbed when their shells are open, and some have spiky shields. Avoiding the dangerous enemies, we make our way up some narrow platforms and find our first bubble of the stage, freeing little guy number 1, and shortly after, an egg housing number 2, as well as a door into a mushroom cave. Inside the cave, we see our first fun perspective shift in the form of this platform here that, when landing on, pans the camera 90 degrees, allowing us to walk into the background. Once in the background, we find an exit to the cave that leads us to another egg holding another little guy. Returning to the foreground, we find a locked door, and after examining it, a guard charges at us with a spear. After explaining who we are and why we are here, he gives us a key to the door and tells us to be careful as there are a lot of weirdos out today, before jumping to his inevitable doom in a bottomless pit. Entering the door, we get deeper into the cave and find 2 floating eggs in the center of a spiral walkway. Breaking the eggs, we get an extra life and our 4th little guy of the stage. Not long after that, we find a key to a door inside another egg, and then the door. Exiting the cave, we find ourselves on a wooden platform over a pit. Inside the pit, we see an egg, and after riding a leaf down and hitting it with an enemy, we free another captive. A little farther into the stage, we find the final little guy and reach the exit. Before we can leave, however, a guard from the Kingdom of Jugpot tells us that we cannot progress any farther because the fairy tree has withered. With this roadblock holding us back, we decide to visit Jugpot to try and find some leads. Back on the world map, we get another little guy concert and then enter stage 2-2, Beyond the Backwards Waterfall. This stage begins by showing us exactly why it's called the Backwards Waterfall. In the canyon, we see a waterfall flowing in reverse up a cliff and figure that's the reason why the trees in the forest are withering. Before getting to the waterfall, we use an enemy to get some extra height required to get Little Guy 1. Advancing forward, the camera locks at the base of the waterfall, and because we trust the devs, we make a blind jump following a gem path to find another little guy. Guess it's easy to trust developers when a game is this well designed. Reaching the top of the waterfall, we enter a cave that shows us another new mechanic of the game. Normally, we can't walk under one-tile gaps while holding an enemy, but here we learn if a roof is sloped, then we can squish the held enemy down and bring them through no problem. We do this, netting us Little Guy number 3. Proceeding out of the cave, we make a quick detour down and re-enter the cave through a different door, getting us the little guy that we saw in the last room. Getting back on track, we see exactly why the kingdom is called Jugpot, being that everything is jug or pot themed. Entering a large jug, we find a branching path that upon taking the lower route, we are immediately rewarded with another little guy. The upper path has us going down a water slide and entering a fun little puzzle room where we have to hit a large guy to use him as a platform to double jump off of. Solving the puzzle, we get the final little guy for the stage. Moving forward, we find another water slide, and upon exiting the cave, we see there's a fish trapped inside a cage. Hitting a lever, we free the fish, who tells us that her mother has been brainwashed by the baddies and offers to take us to the castle in exchange for freeing her. We agree and ride on the fish's back into the arena for boss number 2. Once inside, we are monologued at for a while by Seedoff, one of Gadius's henchmen. Seedoff says that he is one of the strongest lads in all of the land before forcing Pamela to fight us. These are bold words from a guy who won't even fight us himself. The fight begins and we see we are in another circular arena, but this time there are fish statues breaking it up into 2 smaller paths. Spike balls spawn from the fish's mouth, and after a set period of time, Seedoff appears riding one of them. Grabbing Seedoff and throwing him at Pamela 4 times ends the fight. Easy and fun. With the boss defeated, Joka appears to tell us to give up. We don't listen to him and instead push him into the ocean. Free from the enemies, Seedoff reveals that he is actually the king of Jugpot and was brainwashed as well to reverse the waterfall and destroy the forest. Returning the flow of water to its natural state, the king asks the fish we just rescued to assist us. Gladly, she takes us down the waterfall through the forest and up to the fairy tree. From here, we are taken back to the world map for another little guy performance and enter stage 3-1, Rebirth of the Forest. Now able to cross into the forest, we begin this stage with some springboards before finding a gondola that won't move. After jumping on the gondola, we are ambushed by a group of enemies that are luckily exactly what we need to break the boxes leading into the background. In the background, we find a cabin with a tied-up guard who, after being freed, starts the gondola up for us. Riding the gondola, we find a second platform that takes us into the background, netting us a key to a locked door in the foreground, as well as our first little guy. Entering the door, we take another ride and find a second bubble below a breakable crate. Pressing on, we find a gondola and another little guy. I'm sensing a theme here. From here, we see a pillar in the background held up by a breakable box with a second box on top of it. Going into the background, we knock down the pillar and break the box, getting us another key to a locked door that is less than 5 feet away. Once again, we enter another room with a gondola that takes us to a platform where throwing an enemy gets us our 4th little guy. Progressing on, we make a series of jumps, finding a key as well as our 5th little guy hidden in a flower. Using the key on a locked door, we get dropped onto an auto-scroller. Avoiding all the enemies and making our way out of the cave and back into the forest. The next area has us hitting another switch, riding a newly activated gondola, then getting another little guy from inside a flower. A little to the right, we find another guard who informs us that Granny's house has been taken over and everyone has been kicked out. He asks us to help. We agree, and he spawns us a platform to ride into the background. We hop on the platform and get taken to the end of the stage. Back at the world map, our band grows, and we make it to stage 3-2, the stopped gear. Our ride on this platform reaches its end as we crash into an area filled with wooden mechanisms. In this area, we find a large tower in the center of a track that, riding the platform, allows us to engage with the tower from different angles. Down one path, we find a locked door, so we decide to hunt down a key. Exploring down a few of the other paths, we locate the key as well as a little guy that seems inaccessible at the moment. Progressing through the door, we collect our first little guy over a pit behind some enemies. Here we find a switch that opens another path forward. Continuing deeper, we find an egg in a room, but nothing to break it with. It's here that we learn we can bring enemies through door transitions. We then go back and pick up an enemy, and upon returning, break the egg, getting us our second little guy. Through the next door, we find Joka, who confirms that he has been the one leaving these doors locked, making our lives more difficult. In this area, we find another little guy just sitting out in the open. Going back inside the tower, we hit a switch opening a door before realizing that it's tied to a timer. Here we use the enemies of this area, small bomb-like creatures that explode a short time after being hit, to hit the switch when we are already close to the door so we can make progress. In the next room, we once again locate Joka, who poses us with a quote-unquote impossible challenge to get up to him. We have to make a double enemy jump by doing a double jump, then grabbing a second enemy mid-air. We do this challenge once, getting us a little guy to the left, then again advancing to the right. To the right, we find Joka, who runs away in fear, dropping the key that we needed. Going back and unlocking Joka's door, we find a series of switches that, after hitting them in the right order, activates the rest of the machinery in the tower. After a little backtracking, we collect the previously inaccessible little guy and continue on. The next room gives us the final little guy without any issue. We make our way up the final spiral, dodging some spiked balls, and take an elevator to the top of the tower. At the top, we find Joka, who is attempting to torture information out of Granny. Klonoa demands that he stops, and Joka does what he does best, summons a boss and runs away. Thus begins boss fight number 3. The battle with Gelgbolm has us using a spring platform to avoid his charges and fireballs while enabling us to get above him and throw enemies down on his weak spot. After 5 hits, he goes down with no problem. With the boss defeated, we untie Granny, and she informs us that the legend says in order to get into the Dream Kingdom and save Lephais from darkness, we must use the moon pendant at the Temple of the Sun. Klonoa then says that he left the moon pendant with his grandfather, which causes Joka to pop out of the background, revealing that he was hiding, waiting for such information. Scared for Grandpa's life, we rush through a dangerous shortcut to head back home. Before that, we see the map screen register our new 6 little guys who join the band, and we make our way to stage 4-1, a village in danger. In this stage, we see an interesting shift in the color palette of the game, going from the bright and colorful stages that we are used to this gray and washed out look while we platform through the dangers to get back home. We start with some very tight jumps, getting us our first little guy before too long. Immediately after, we see a hole in the wall past a door that obviously houses progression. Going into the hole and making a double enemy jump, we locate little guy number 2. Back through the progression hole, we find yet another little guy on some crumbling platforms. I think this stage might be a short one. But before we can even think that, we locate our 4th little guy a little to the left. Next, we go up the center path and through a room with suspended platforms that flip when we land on them. Over the pits, we are met with some swinging platforms that hide not one, but the last 2 little guys. Collecting them both, we then get to the exit, clearing the stage. Once again, we're met with a concert on the map before entering stage 4-2, a lull in the wind. This stage begins with us descending down a hill and entering a cave with water that pushes us forward. Fighting our way through the water, we collect our first little guy. The water continues to push us outside through a sunny waterfall where we get our second little guy. Seems like World 4 is going to be pretty rapid fire. Past the water, we find some green gems that break when we throw enemies at them. Breaking a few and making our way over a wind pit, we locate our 3rd little guy. A little deeper, we find a switch that opens a red gem door and gets us into a room filled with the spookiest thing imaginable. Oh no, it's bones. Scouting above the skeleton, we find another place to do a double enemy jump. Doing so gets us into a wind tunnel and nets us our fourth little guy. To the right and over a few more wind pillars, we find a cave that inside houses a small platforming challenge that rewards us with, you guessed it, our fifth little guy. Back in the main room and over some crumbling ribs, we find our final little guy as well as a path into the village. Now back in the village, we see Grandpa safe in the distance, but before we can get to him, Joka appears in an airplane and in a bitter turn of events, drops a nuke wiping out both Grandpa and our home. We chase Joka down and after finding him, he does what he does best, summons a boss and runs away. This dragonfly looking boss has us on a swinging platform where we need to throw enemies at him while we're close and avoid obstacles while we wait for the platform to swing back. This fight takes us 3 attempts but ends up going down without much issue. With the boss defeated, Klonoa rushes to his grandpa's side who somehow managed to barely survive the bombs dropping on him. With his dying breath, Grandpa apologizes for losing the moon pendant and tells us to go get it back and save the world. He then passes away in our arms, and now things are serious. Pamela the dolphin from Jugpot then comes to whisk us away to the Sun Temple. A quick peek at the map screen shows us another 6 little guys added to our concert, and we move on to stage 5-1, the 4 orbs. Pamela drops us off as far into the Sun Temple as she is able, leaving the rest to us. We enter a pipe and are brought into the central chamber of the temple. Once inside, 2 sun priests inform us that the 4 elemental orbs have been stolen from their pedestals by Gadius's henchmen, and if we want to advance, we have to recover them. Agreeing to help them, we head to the left first, to a path marked with red and blue. Down this path, we find our first little guy outside the red door. Collecting him, we then enter the red door. In the red room, we appear to be in some kind of forge. Here we find some platforms that can be knocked down in the background, as well as another little guy. Going over the platforms we knocked down gets us the red orb and an exit. We take this exit and are brought back to the lobby. With the first orb slotted, we head back to the left to find the blue path. This route has us doing some platforming in the opening area, which leads us to a little guy and the blue orb. Immediately after the orb, we enter a door which nets us another little guy and the path back to the lobby. With the left side done, we head to the right next to get our green and yellow orbs. We start with the yellow path, which has us making some simple jumps over some cog-like platforms and fire spitters. Down here, we also find an egg hidden low that has our 5th little guy in it. Shortly after, we get the yellow orb and are taken back to the lobby. One last trip in, we use an enemy to hit a switch, opening a green door. Going in the green door, we hit another switch, opening another green door. This cycle happens 3 more times before we enter an open room where we get our final little guy as well as the green orb. Back in the lobby with all 4 gems slotted, the door is now unlocked and we enter. Inside, the 2 priests thank us for opening the temple and say that if we hop in the light elevator, we can get up to the altar, allowing us to stop Gadius from breaking the seal and sending the world into eternal nightmares. We hop on the elevator, clearing the stage. Back on the world map, we are met with the one universal constant in the form of a little guy concert before heading into stage 5-2, between light and darkness. Now in the upper portion of the Sun Temple, we find a priest knocked out on the ground. Waking the priest, he tells us that Gadius has already opened the moon gate and is beginning to gather energy to turn the world of dreams into nightmares. He then says that we can still probably stop him if we're able to confront him as soon as possible. So we do just that. Going to the right gets us into the actual stage where we are met with a new gimmick. This stage shifts from light to dark, where in the light the enemies are normal and able to be picked up. In the dark, they are more dangerous, plentiful, and unable to be grabbed. Avoiding a few fire fountains, we find our first little guy. Into the next room, we find a platform that allows us to enter the background, netting us little guy number 2. Clearing that room and going back outside, we do another double enemy jump to avoid a mechanic where platforms only appear in the dark and collect our 3rd little guy. We continue to ascend the temple, reaching an area that requires us to actually engage meaningfully with the platforms in order to get another fast little guy. After freeing him and defeating a large enemy in the background, we find a maze-like room that hides the final 2 little guys. one down a route requiring us to do a double enemy jump and the other through a hidden door. With all the captives freed, we make our way through a light and dark room and up another elevator. For this stage's final challenge, we see a jump to the left that is a little bit too high to make. To the right, we find an enemy that can be used for double jumping. Unfortunately, he's locked in a cage. Hitting the switch next to the cage makes it drop a little. We then see that this area has more switches. Guess we have to hit them all. Hitting all 4 switches opens the cage, allowing us to grab the enemy and progress to the left. Up the elevator, we now confront Gadius. Mad at Joka's failure to stop us, Gadius tells us that it's too late to do anything, before disappearing and once again sending the ever-incompetent Joka to fight us as his one final chance. Determined to win, Joka finally fights us one-on-one. This fight, much like the stage we just finished, is divided into light and dark phases. The light phase is simple. Joka bounces between the circular platforms like a DVD logo, and we hit him with the many infinitely respawning enemies. The dark phase is more deadly, however. In the dark, Joka becomes a large fish that charges at us as well as slamming his fins on the platform. In order to switch back to light, we must step on every platform 3 times to turn it from blue to green to yellow. Once all platforms are yellow, light is restored and we're able to damage Joka again. A handful of attempts later, we land the final blow, causing him to explode into glitter and putting us into a pre-rendered cutscene. Here we see a laser beam fire from the temple into the ground, causing an evil fortress to rise from the earth. The castle then begins to spread darkness over the land, which makes Klonoa a little grumpy. Pamela then shows up, and we ride on her back into the final world. We get calmed down a little bit by another little guy concert on the world map before moving into stage 6-1, the Legendary Kingdom. Entering the Crystalline Palace, we find that most of the routes here are gated off by Gadius-shaped statues of 4 different colors: red, blue, green, and yellow. Finding an open path, we explore our way through a room with an electrified floor and moving balls. Near the end, we find little guys 1 and 2 before hitting a red crystal that removes all red roadblocks from the stage. Progressing through the red area, we are met with a lot of enemy spawns as well as little guy number 3. After some enemies on a moving platform, we find the blue crystal and move on. Now in the blue path, we are met by the exploding enemies from the factory as well as a cheeky little timing puzzle. Here we locate the 4th little guy and the green crystal. In the next room, we see a large swarm of enemies that, after blowing them up with a bomb enemy, nets us another little guy. We then advance to the green path. Down this route, we are shown the mechanic that these crystal platforms disappear after being stood on for a short time. We do some really fun quick jumps, getting us the final little guy of the stage as well as the yellow crystal. Returning through the gauntlet, we ascend through the yellow path, leading us to the white crystal and finally to an elevator to clear the stage. Looks like another short one. Back on the world map, we are met with the penultimate little guy performance before heading into stage 6-2, the time of restoration. Once near the top of the kingdom, we are met by the queen, who says that things have gotten a little too out of hand for her to handle. She also reveals that Hu Pao is actually the prince of the Moon Kingdom. Confused and wanting answers, Klonoa agrees to help as long as when this is all over, Hu Pao explains exactly what's going on. The queen then goes somewhere safe and we move on to continue up the tower. The first challenge has us making some little jumps while being chased by enemies, which gets us our first little guy of the stage. The next room has us avoid some oscillating enemies to get another little guy. A little deeper in the room, we find a switch in the background that opens the path forward. Down this path, we find 3 switches that, when hit in quick succession, open a new route back in the opening room. Rushing back to the beginning, we find that the path starts very similar to the first one, with a series of tight jumps and chasing enemies. At the end of this room, we make a triple enemy jump, getting us another little guy. In the next room, we notice the gimmick of this stage. Each area is a copy of the last one, with the exception of the jumps getting a little harder and the traps getting more devious. Making our way to another room, we don't get tricked by a little guy in a pit and instead use an enemy to free him and not get trapped ourselves. Advancing a little forward, we find the switch opening the path to the 3-switch puzzle. These switches once again need to be hit in quick succession, but this time they're in the foreground, so we need to use enemies. After a few tries, we get it and unlock a new path in the starting room. Entering into the new area, we once again do some tight jumps, the inside room, the outside room, and the 3-switch room, getting us not only our final little guy, but also the path forward. Returning one last time to the opening room, we enter the large golden door and ascend to the final battle. Now in a dark room, we find Gadius, who is determined to send the world into eternal nightmares, even if it means his own destruction. Refusing to let him do so, we start the final battle. The fight begins with us dropping on a spinning ring with teleporters placed around the ground. Touching the teleporters punishes us by taking us outside of the ring, where Gadius gets extra chances to damage us. Once back inside the ring, Gadius throws 3 different varieties of attacks at us: Raining Flame, Bouncing Beams, and the dreaded Electric Triangle. Each of these has different teleporter locations and more chances to take damage. The fight is simple once we learn the patterns, and we take him down after a few dozen hits. With Gadius defeated, we get our last little guy concert and move on to the ending. Standing over Gadius's body, the Sun Priest, Mason, King of Jugpot, Granny, and Moon Queen all come to celebrate our victory. But wait! Suddenly our celebration is cut short as Gadius rises from the dead to finish his spell and begins summoning Natum. The tower starts to crumble and all hope is lost. But wait again! The Queen interjects, saying that by using the 5 tribes we can defeat Natum with the power of friendship. We hop on our fish friend's back one last time, entering the true final battle. In this battle, we see the 5 tribe leaders all standing on cannon platforms that need to be loaded. Dodging the boss's tongue and shockwave attacks, we load every cannon by throwing little guys into them. And in one short blast, we wipe out all of the enemy's health. Victory is finally ours. But wait once more! Natum inhales Klonoa, bringing us into a world of darkness, with nothing more than a spooky face in the background. Time for Phase 2. The face spawns 4 gems on a tilting platform that we have to hit with enemies that he spawns, all while avoiding his laser eyes. Breaking all 4 gems causes him to spawn one final gem that, hitting twice, defeats the face for good. For real. This time, victory has been achieved. But wait, not actually. We have Phase 3. In this last phase, we are met again by the 5 Cannon Elders, who are now floating below some crystal platforms that Natum loves to break. After throwing enemies down at the 5 cannons while avoiding the shockwaves, we weaken his shield just enough that one final hit from Hupao causes Natum to explode into 1,000,000 bits, ending the fight. But wait! Just kidding, that was the whole fight. With Natum defeated, we free the diva and return home. Once back in our bleak, destroyed village, Hupao reveals that we aren't originally from this world and he brought us here to defeat Gadius, and once the Song of Renewal is sung, we will be sent home. A cinematic then begins, and the Song of Rebirth is being sung. Klonoa is sucked into a portal and taken home. Hupao then looks down sadly as life is restored to the lands. This scene fades into the storybook pages, and we get credits, finishing off Klonoa. Part 3. Final Thoughts. Klonoa the Door to Phantomile is a very delightful game. The simple controls allow for some extremely fun platforming challenges that never feel unreasonable. If you lose a life in this game, it's your own fault, and likely won't happen twice. The game is also the perfect length to be beaten in one sitting, making the player want more in the end. It also has a phenomenal 100% reward in the form of the Diva Tower for players that want an extra challenge. My only complaint is that I wanted more in the end. Visually, the game is stunning. The colorful areas of the beginning are put into contrast with the dark later stages, which fit perfectly with the motif of the game. However, I wish that some of the areas had a little bit more visual clarity when it comes to what was in the foreground and background, but that's a small issue. I would have also been remiss not to mention the wonderful design of all the little guys this game has to offer. Much like the visuals, the audio design and music here are near perfection for what the game is. From mysterious cave themes to light and airy forest songs, there is a little bit of everything for everyone. The story this game tries to tell is a bit of an odd one. I wouldn't say it was exactly bad, but it was certainly weird, and at the end, the whole alternate worlds plot point was kind of a miss. The game also leaves on a bit of a macabre note, which is strange given the colorful and whimsical theming of the rest of the game. This game may be the quintessential 2.5D platformer. It does so much fun stuff with perspective and switching lanes that captures the genre in its purest form. The game is a breeze, even with going for 100% and having zero focus. I made it through this game without taking a single game over, which isn't a bad thing, but I could see some people treating it like an easy game for babies. As a whole, I walked away from Klonoa very happy and would say without a doubt that it's the best PS1 game that we have played so far on the Expedition, and it's not even close. I fear that this game might be the kind to ruin all other games in the genre for me, since I will unfortunately be comparing them to it. In the end, Klonoa Door to Phantomile took me 4 hours and 14 minutes to finish, and was awarded a 9 out of 10 in gameplay, a 9 out of 10 in graphics, a 9 out of 10 in music, a 5 out of 10 in story, a 9 out of 10 in wow factor, a 1 out of 10 in difficulty, and an overall score of 8 out of 10. Thank you all so much for making it to the end of this video. If this is your first step in the PSXpedition, consider subscribing to the channel so you can be up to date when new videos come out. At the time of recording this, I still have over 250 games finished and recorded that I need to make write-ups for, with more games being finished every week. If you want to watch the full unedited playthrough of Klonoa with the 100% bonus reward of the Diva Tower, as well as any other game that I have finished up to this point, they are all located in the VOD archive. If you want to see me finish these games live, or suggest a game yourself, be sure to check out my Twitch channel. All relevant links are in the description down below. Also, consider liking this video and leaving a comment, as it's an easy way to support me. Also, it's free. I've been Uriah, and I hope to see you on our next step in the PSXpedition.